Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Memorial Day weekend edition of Black Health Trust. We are so happy that you have found time to join us, and we're looking forward to a very interesting conversation this afternoon. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Neighbor-Stevens, Dr. Walks, and the great Dr. Jocelyn Hines up in Maryland, and Simon. We have an interesting session today. We're going to talk about getting ready for summer and what it may bring. And at some point during the conversation, I want to bring in the obesity epidemic because everybody's going to want to get ready for their bikinis for this summer. Is that right? Down in Tampa, Florida, and Tennessee, Dr. Neighbor-Stevens?
If you're getting ready for this summer in your bikini, you waited a little too late.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We should get started. Dr. Neighbor, do you want to take the lead? Dr. Walsh, Dr. Hines?
Well, we want to have a kind of an open mic today. We have several topics that we will throw out, but we also invite our regular viewers and our new viewers, if they have topics or comments that they want to make, we are inviting you to join us. The first topic that I'd like to bring up is sort of a self-confession, I guess. I have to say that when we go over conditions and diseases multiple times, I feel sometimes like, am I boring? Is this boring to our audience? And then it's amazing how things work out. So we were all saddened this week to hear about the death of Tina Turner. And it turned out, I know you're wondering, where is she going with this? As it turns out, Tina Turner has had an amazing life. She had some awful things that she had to overcome, which she did successfully, from what we can tell. And
her body was preserved.
Anyway, and
go ahead, Barbara.
And she had in her later life several health problems. She had high blood pressure. She had a stroke, she had colon cancer, and she was on renal dialysis. And it was reported that she stated that she never, until it was too late, understood why it was important for her to take her high blood pressure medicine. She didn't really get the message until she found herself with end-stage renal disease. And after hearing and reading that, I said, we can't stop spreading the word. We can run the risk of being boring to some, but there are apparently hundreds and thousands of people who still don't understand what they need to do to help take care of themselves. So I will open it up with that thought.
So if you all don't mind, I will jump in. As I've shared before, I lead/host men's fellowship through our church on Saturday mornings. So every Saturday morning we talk about issues that are related to men, not just health issues, but whatever's going on, family issues, the faith issues, and all of that. We had a doctor on yesterday who was talking about the health needs of men and what have you. And I asked him, I said, why is it that men don't take care of their health? Why is it that all these messages go out, all this information goes out? And he raised something that I thought was very interesting. He raised the fact that in his experience, a lot of men don't want to deal with the vulnerability of finding out something is wrong. There's this denial. that nothing is wrong with me. I'm a man, I'm strong, I'm tough, and there's this. And I don't think it's only men. I think it's scary for us to think about the fact that something could be wrong. I might need something. I have patients all the time that I see who ask me, well, how long do I have to take this medicine? I'm like, you take the medicine as long as you need to take the medicine. There are some medicines that are like, we're going to be taking this for a while. Thyroid medicine, blood pressure medicine. There are medicines that people need to take in order to make their bodies work. But that notion that until it hits me, I want to just pretend it doesn't exist and it can't hit me. And yes, Dr. Neighbor-Stephens, I agree. We have to continue to talk to people because at some point they will be able to connect with the message in spite of themselves. And hopefully it's not after that first stroke or after that first heart attack or after they find out that their kidneys are no longer working well.
I'll also just say I found in my experience too, for some of the more common chronic diseases, that space that feels like everybody has this, also can sometimes keep people from taking it seriously, because sometimes, especially for things like high blood pressure, where there isn't necessarily something to feel. You don't necessarily feel different. There's nothing that's hurting you. It's called a silent killer for a reason, right? Until you have some of these sequelae that by the time, and I tell myself, by the time you wait to feel something, what you feel might be something I can't take back, right? That it may be not reversible. But I also think that there's this space like you're talking about before and vulnerability, but the part where it feels like my body's supposed to be self-sufficient. And if it's not, like I need pills, right, to somehow, make it through this thing. Like, what's wrong with my body? My body is letting me down, right? Like, and we can will it away. I will will it. I will will it with I'm just going to change this, and I'm just going to change my attitude, and I'm stressed out, and then I'm going to will this hypertension away. Partly, I think, getting back to your point, Dr. Walks, on that's not how I wish to see myself. I have had patients literally cry because I've said that they need to go on blood pressure medicine. And the first time it happened to me, I thought that there was a misunderstanding, right? Like that you thought that I said something different, but no, they heard me. It was just a hit to the psyche that there is something that I can't fix with just my behavior, my thoughts, to will it away.
Wow.
All right. Well, is there any other comment that anyone wants to make? Because if not, I got another one.
Let me speak to that issue of the hypertension and renal failure. There's another potential factor involved, that there's some genetic variants that we've talked about briefly before that affect up to 35% of the African-American population that immigrated years ago because of slavery from West Africa. And maybe 3,000, 10,000 years ago, these genetic variants popped up to protect that population against the tsetse flies, starting of something called sleeping sickness. And it turns out that this particular variant, if it's not present, you don't get kidney disease, but you can get sleeping sickness. If you have one variable from your parents, it protects you from getting sleeping sickness, but you don't get kidney disease. But for those who get two variants from their parents, are at that increased 35% risk for kidney failure. And there's right now no FDA-approved treatment for it. So some of this renal failure, which can also cause hypertension, can cause CKD, et cetera, can be set off if you get HIV, if you get lupus, if you get stress, which we all do. So there's a lot more of that picture, and some of this you can treat with high blood pressure medicines, and some of it, no matter what you do, you're going to have it. So we should have available genetic testing if you have other relatives that have chronic kidney disease and things that put their kidneys at risk. But it's important to keep that blood pressure, as Dr. Walk said, below 120/80 anyway, and use some of the drugs that are now out. We can stop a lot of renal failure, except for the variant cause kind.
So Dr. Maxey, let me just follow up on that, because the way that relates to what Dr. Neighbor-Stephens was talking about, and then Dr. Hines' comment about a patient being devastated by the news that, oh, you got something, but we can treat it. No, I got something. I don't want to have anything. I have talked to physicians who certainly know all about the dangers of hypertension, who found out for the first time on a routine exam that their blood pressure was 190/110 or what have you. And so there is, despite all of the good information, that if anybody knows about chronic kidney disease or CKD, it's Randall Maxey. Despite everything that you know, despite what you tell people, despite Dr. Neighbor-Stephens' examples about people who we all know that are famous, despite Dr. Hines' example of how it's okay, we can treat you, there is still this challenge that goes back to what Dr. Neighbor-Stephens started with, the challenge about us not wanting to find out that something is wrong. We know we should have a primary care doc. We know we should get ourselves examined for health maintenance so we can stay healthy. And yet the fear of somebody telling us, like Dr. Hines mentioned, that, oh, we found something. It's not bad. We found something and we can give you some medicine for it. I think there is a cultural piece, especially in our African-American community. We don't want anything to be wrong with us. Goodness gracious, there's enough wrong. Just being Black in America is hard enough. Don't tell me I have anything else that I have to deal with. And I think we have to acknowledge and accept that that's a problem in our community. And I think we have to be prepared to talk with people beyond just their diagnosis about how they're feeling about this diagnosis and how they feel about the need that they may have to get some sort of routine follow-up and take some kind of medication.
Good point, Dr. Wilkes. Good point. There are some challenges out there, but we know we all have to pay taxes and we all have to die. But there's some research on the future that will help us out with when we have to die.
Amen.
The other thing too that stands out too in this particular example is also about, like, money doesn't fix everything, right? Like, even though we're talking about in theory resources, access to probably, great health care, those kinds of things, being rich doesn't fix everything. And there's plenty of people who think that, if you have enough money, you can escape some of these things. And that's not true either. Half the reason Tina Turner lived in Switzerland was to remove herself from the African-American experience in America, right? But that it is not an exemption from all of the different health concerns. Who knows what's in your gene pool? There are just getting older, right? There are things you could change, and then there are some other factors that you can't change.
Yeah.
And Dr. Gibson, I'm sorry, Dr. Maxey, go ahead.
The point that you made, Dr. Wilkes and Dr. Hines, one of the factors, remember I mentioned that you can get kidney failure if it triggers the variant like HIV infections and lupus. But the one that stood out to me most, it could be the African-American experience that causes stress. And that is one of the things that maybe in the future we can start to work on that, because we all have a certain amount of unconscious PTSD, unconscious stress. And there may be a lot of value in us getting smarter and dealing with those issues, Dr. Wilkes.
So absolutely, Dr. Maxey. And I think Dr. Gibson put a comment in the chat about starting health education early. I know the four of us that are on my screen right here all have a story, at least one, about a physician that we know. And typically, if you're an MD or a DO, if you're a physician, you have the gold standard of health education. You know about as much about health as anybody else on the planet. And physicians have the same issue. So I agree with Dr. Gibson's thought about health education early, so we can culturally be a more healthy population from the beginning. And at the same time, all of us know that some of the worst patients, some of the most obstinate, intransient people, when it comes to taking good care of their health, are the people that know the most about it. Go figure.
That's true. I have one other quick question before I give it back to Dr. Neighbor-Stevens. I had an eye operation a couple of years ago, and the doctor told me I had to lay flat down with my face down for 2 weeks for the transplant to take. And then 2 weeks later, he told me I need another 2 weeks. He knew I had to have 2 months, but if he had told me 2 months, I couldn't have done it. So he lied to me on purpose. Is there anything that we can do to temporarily tell a white lie to our patients to make them compliant?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment on what Dr. Gibson said. I do agree. Not included in the curriculum of most elementary and junior high and high school now that used to be there when I was there. Like there was vocational stuff they're talking about now.
Yeah.
We had home ec, all of that good stuff, segregated schools. But something came out in the news here in Tennessee this week that I have, and I don't think it's just Tennessee. I don't know, but I just have this sneaky suspicion it's not just Tennessee. They announced that 60% of the third grade students in the state of Tennessee fail the 10 cap and are looking at the possibility of being retained in the third grade in this next.
What's the 10 cap?
The proficiency exam that all states give kids at certain grades. I don't remember the rest of them. So, yeah, it would be nice for us to do vocational education and health education, but it looks like we need to go back to the basics. And you know, the majority most likely adversely impacted by this phenomenon. And there are several reasons that have brought us to this point, but it's probably hitting our community the worst, as usual.
So Dr. Neighbor-Stevens, you're absolutely right. I remember when I served on the State Board of Education for the state of Maryland, one of the things that we did was to publish a document, a book actually called Healthy Beginnings, that goes directly to Dr. Gibson's point about beginning to educate young parents and children about how to begin building a healthy life and a healthy life experience. So there are those efforts. I think they need to be more consistent across the board so that because it isn't, I mean, everything is so connected, right? Our lives are intertwined with not only, just to cite one example, the kids right now over the Memorial Day weekend, there are a lot of children in this country who get their nutrition at school. And so when you're missing a Monday in school, you're doing Saturday, Sunday, and Monday without a good diet, without your normal diet, because the families don't have. I was talking to a sister of mine who is an educator and talking about how food is handed out to kids because they meet certain requirements and they need to be fed outside of the home. So there are a lot of things that impact the physical health and the mental health of a lot of folks in our community.
So with that lead in, I was gonna raise something else, and I do want to come back to it, and I'm very watchful of the time. We've been doing a lot about mental health. May is mental health. Do a lot-
Barbara, fix your microphone. You're not coming through. You're breaking up.
We do a lot. We have been doing a lot on mental health issues in the month of May. May is Mental Health Month. But and I think a couple of weeks ago now, maybe we talked about an advisory that the U.S. Surgeon General put out regarding social isolation. Well, this week he put a guidance out raising the issue of the effects of social media use has on youth mental health. That's a mouthful. And I urge those of you who have concerns about children and mental health to Google it and take a look at it. It is confirmatory of what I know many of us have been thinking for a long time. But the data is beginning to come in. It's not definitive, but children and adolescents are watching at least 3.5 hours of screen time a day, probably more in a lot of cases. And there are some direct correlations being identified between mental health issues, bullying, body image, depression, and we need to do what all of us can do at our level. There's a role for policymakers. There's a role for the media companies themselves to be responsible and to be held responsible. And there's a role at the community level to look at and be very involved in what our young people are doing with themselves. Again, I can think back hearing my grandmother and mother talking about how my brother and I should not be allowed to watch too much television. And here we are now talking about our kids and their engagement with social media. Comments?
So this one's near and dear for me. So I have a 10-year-old, well, almost 10-year-old and an 8-year-old who, I think there are several things about what you said. For me, there's screen time as one issue. Then there's social media as a separate issue, right? Because screens are at school and being used for all kinds of good, educational things. There's one discussion on screens and how people learn how to socialize and do you actually know how to engage with humans? That's one of the things that we struggle with at my house. Like, ooh, hey, look, one of my children, there are humans here. Let's actually speak to them, right? Because one of them would prefer to stay on their screen. As a matter of fact, I think there's a bit of a social anxiety that one of them has just because that is his preference. He knows how to engage and control the situations on the screen versus with humans. Then when we talk about the social media part, here's what's interesting in particular about all the things that I'm going to lump into the category of social media, especially if you're talking about younger kids. There is the content that you intended to consume, which could be completely appropriate, right? Maybe you were looking for the cartoon of your choice, right? That was appropriate for your 7-year-old or 8-year-old. But the commercials that come on in between, right? Where that next video goes or 2 or 3 videos down could be things that are completely different than where you started from. Even some of the apps that you may allow, kids to play with. My kids have it's a little game where they use their little fidgets. The game itself is completely appropriate. The commercials and the ads that jump in between are absolutely not appropriate. And you can't make them go away. The algorithms or whatever just kind of feed it. Then there's the space where you have adults targeting content towards younger people and intentionally making themselves look younger, right? So that they are appealing to a younger audience. And again, some of the content can be appropriate, but then it can very quickly move to a whole other space. And especially for your younger audiences, they don't always know, one, how they even got there. Two, by the time you figure out that you need to turn this off, you can't unsee or unhear what's already there. And then when you mix in, these preteen years and younger teens, that's when Dr. Neighbor-Stephens, you can speak to this too, like body image. Who am I? What am I? That space where you want to fit in. Well, filtered images can really give you a very skewed presentation of not only how you see others, but how you see yourself. If you only see yourself through a filter all the time, that makes you look awesome. Your skin is glowing, your eyes are perfectly placed, your nose is right. When you go look in your regular mirror, how could you not be disappointed that it doesn't look the same as when I show up on the screen? Like it is complicated. My 10-year-old wants a phone, and because she's like, all her other friends have a phone, so that she's almost in the 5th grade. There are spaces where you have to give your folks a phone for safety reasons. Maybe they walk home from school, maybe they go to practices alone, those kinds of things. But then there's a door there that you are potentially giving them access to. It's tough to give a young, impulsive mind that kind of power, right? That kind of access that oftentimes they're not really prepared to deal with. Sorry for the rant, but
No, you're not ranting, but I will ask you, what do you think should be done about it?
I don't know all of the safeguards for how to. So here's what I will appreciate about our schools. When my kids go to public school, part of the curriculum for technology, and they have a technology curriculum, includes the safe consumption of technology, right? And they talk about things on even basic things. Don't go meeting strangers, how to identify or how to kind of pick up fraudulent, or spammy kinds of, emails and things of that nature. It talks about safe consumption of social media. They teach the kids where to go to find out what kind of apps are safe. What do you do about it? So here's the thing. I don't really have an answer, but you know what I also know? This is not accidental. Like the algorithms are targeting our subconscious. All of this didn't come about just randomly. This is what they wanted. They wanted consumers. They wanted us to be addicted. By they, I mean the folks that were the founding spaces of your Facebooks, your YouTube. The intent was for us to be addicted to our phones, and and that's exactly what they've gotten. It's that space where you put the phone down and then you pick it back up. Like something's changed in the last 45. Something's changed in the last 45 seconds.
Yeah, some of that has to do with the sophistication of marketing.
Yes.
And the fact that most of our media is driven by marketing ploys.
Yes.
And one of the things I want to bring up with that is the fact that this body image stuff. Now, a lot of us have said, well, body image shouldn't be important. But body image, whether it's the image of the fact being obese, is at least 90% unhealthy. And we say we shouldn't shame people who are obese, and we shouldn't. But on the other hand, we should not say that being obese is all right. That's a conflict. It's not all right from a health standpoint, especially in children. I invite comment on that.
So I want to go back to, yes, Dr. Maxey. And I want to go back to a comment Dr. Hines made. It's complicated. And there are several things that Dr. Neighbor-Stephens brought up. Dr. Neighbor-Stephens brought up not just the impact of what's on the screen, but the screen time as well. And what Dr. Hines was talking about is you may set it, it's sort of like setting up a movie for folks to watch. You've seen the movie, you put it on, and I'm happy. I know exactly what my kids are going to watch. If they drop stuff in the middle of that, and you know that that's going to happen, and you're not sure what that stuff is, it forces you to sit and watch the movie with them so you can cover their eyes at the right moment or turn the movie off at the right moment or what have you. And so, again, something Dr. Gibson dropped into the chat is about control. A lot of the times, bless your heart, young parents, there is something about needing a break. And if your kids are going to be sitting there watching a movie, or your kids are going to be on a screen for a half an hour, and that gives you time to do the laundry or do your homework or whatever it is you have to do, that is God-sent time. So you can't sit there and watch every second of what your kids are doing on the screen, but that's the only way to keep them completely protected. So it is, to go back to Dr. Hines' statement, it's complicated. There's a lot that we are trying to do. So it isn't only, I want my kids to be entertained and educated with their screen time, but I also want my kids to be protected, which means I need to be there. But sometimes the screen time is your time for you to do something else. It is not easy. The question asked about what the solution is, I think the solution is to make sure that when you set those parental controls on whatever screen you give your kids, that you set them to the best of your ability and check them from time to time to make sure the content is appropriate content for young people. And then I think you do have to limit the screen time. And what that means is you have to spend the time. It's not watching TV. Kids, a lot of kids don't watch TV anymore. They don't want to watch TV. TV is not as engaging as a game that they're playing or some video with which they can interact on these smaller screens. I'm amazed by that. Even older, like adolescents and young adults, they don't watch TV. They haven't watched TV in months or years. They're getting their news through something on a smaller screen. It is, to accurately quote Dr. Hines, it's complicated. Our society is changing. And so we have to be willing to invest the time to understand how these things are working, how the algorithms are picking up what they're showing to our kids. And then God bless us all to be as exciting and as entertaining and as engaging as those little screens. If you can take your kids out and jump all around and throw stuff at them and get their attention, but it's hard.
What about marketing to body image, Dr. Walks?
I think that is a separate issue. I was talking to Dr. Neighbor-Stephens yesterday, and I was in Atlanta, and the Atlanta airport, they're now marketing as the busiest airport in the world. So please ask me about my level of intelligence, how I wound up in the busiest airport in the world on one of the busiest weekends in the world. I'm back home safely, praise the Lord, thank you. But as I was going through the Atlanta airport, I was amazed at the number of people who just really don't care that when you put on that midriff top and there is so much more hanging out of it than there is covered by it, and that's okay. It is not unacceptable anymore. It used to be unacceptable for folks to walk around dressed a certain way if their bodies didn't look a certain way. And now that's out the window. It's out the window. And I think to Dr. Maxey's point, I don't want anyone to feel ashamed because there are a lot of reasons why people may be overweight or they may be obese. A lot of reasons. If anybody hasn't seen it, there's an interesting documentary on Donna Summer and her life and some of the things about her children that I think was really worth watching, in part because of some of the understanding about what happened through her life and her career with her kids. But there are a lot of reasons why particularly young girls gain a lot of weight, and it has to do with what they're exposed to and their experiences. So
Well,
I don't
my
want to
question
blame
is-
anybody for how
My
they
question
look.
is a little bit different. My question
sorry?
is, should we, I don't think we should shame people, but I think it's our obligation to let them know that it is a health hazard to be obese.
So,
It's health hazard for diabetes, health hazard for hypertension, health hazard mentally. I'm not talking about just what somebody thinks or feels, but it's not good for you to be obese. And we shouldn't be
Dr.
shy.
So Dr. Maxey, the point I was trying to make, and you know I don't make points briefly. Let me just say briefly, is that it is complicated, and I think we have to understand what may be going on in someone's life. Is that what we have to understand what's going on in someone's life so that when we approach them with that very important health message, that it's approached in a way that it can be received.
Yes, agreed.
You're on mute, Barbara.
I didn't do it. Somebody's giving me a hint. I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's a health hazard, all the rest of that. But I do think there is something very frustrating for the medical practitioner and hurtful for the person who's dealing with the obesity, that the fact is they're on the way, but we still don't have any real good remedies for, well, I shouldn't say good remedies. There are remedies, but there are not enough remedies that can be applied in a broad way to address the epidemic of obesity that we have. Yes, there are certain people who make the determination that they want to undergo bariatric surgery. There are some people lately who are using some of the new drugs that will help you to lose up to 17% of your body BMI. But if you stop using the drug, the weight comes right back. And then we have all of the other drugs that have been around for years that have not been that successful. And dieting alone is usually not successful. And you absolutely cannot exercise it away. It is physiologically impossible. So we really don't have good remedies yet. Yes, we can educate about the need, but I think we are handicapped because we don't have any really good remedies. I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm not saying you don't talk about it, but I think we also need to be honest with the patient about what the real options are.
I think we do have some good remedies, and maybe Dr. Hines can speak to some of that, but some of these new FDA-approved drugs, the two of them I know about now, one is Wegovy and one is Ozempic. They do more than just weight loss, but they actually treat the pleasure centers of the brain. And a lot of things that we do, including smoking, eating, attitude adjustment, they're based upon the pleasure centers and how they fix. So I think we're on the right track. And I think people should look more to that. Now, there's some dangers with those drugs. Some of them can cause pancreatitis and other things. But like we said about the vaccine, there may be a more cost benefit of those using those drugs and some of the things that will derive from them as they get more sophisticated. But I'm convinced that from a metabolic standpoint, this pendant that we have for just accepting obesity long run is one of the problems of our community, especially. I had one patient who weighed 380 pounds. And when I see her, she said, well, Doc, I lost 2 pounds a day. I lost 2 pounds, and she's happy with that. And she's at severe risk, not only from the metabolic causes, but things like arthritis on the weight-bearing bones, et cetera. I'm just so disturbed about how we just are accepting. I agree that we have to be genuinely concerned and meet people where they are, but I think we belittled being obese for too long.
So there are absolutely aspects of that I do think that there are ways in which we have embraced obesity in ways that are potentially ultimately not healthy. But let's go back to some of the treatment discussion, right? So for some of the newer medications, the first thing you have to tackle is, even if they are effective, there's an access issue, right? And not the manufacturer access issue is being resolved, but that is not addressing the cost, the financial there's a financial access issue. So to Dr. Nabors-Stevens' point, right now, especially because in many instances, these medications may or may not be approved by your insurance. Many weight loss programs, even those that are come with prescriptions, are not covered by insurance for outside the extremely obese population. So we're talking like $1,400 a month kind of money for Wegovy and Ozempic, that kind of thing, right? That is exclusionary to the majority of the of the population. So it's one thing to say, oh, there's a solution out there, but if the majority of us can't access, it might as well not exist. To your point also about potential side effects, right? I'm a slow adopter, right? I'm a slow adopter to new treatments and things of that nature. So okay, let's see. But to your point about how it addresses the pleasure centers, they're looking at using some of those medications to deal with addiction and all kinds of other things because of just that. I also think that we also have to remember that from a cultural point of view, it isn't until relatively recently that we have embraced the concept that it's not just a lack of willpower, and that if you just calorie restrict and exercise, then this should go away. Many, many, many people have been told that there's no way you're following the diet, because if you were following the diet, you would be losing weight, and they're over there telling you they're eating, bananas and lettuce, and we're going, absolutely not. There are generations of providers that have that were trained in that theory, right? And it kind of has almost like the dentist of, like, there's a whole cohort of people that when you say dentist, like, oh, I can't go, oh, the dentist, right? Stepping on the scale for lots of people at their doctor's office is the least pleasurable part of of their primary care or their doctor's office experience, because they don't want to see the number. I don't want to see the number. It's going to be a whole thing. Like it that in and of itself is enough to keep people away. I think right now we are absolutely getting to a space where we're trying to understand more about the biome, how your gut bacteria and the bacteria in your system affect your ability to lose weight. Because it used to just, oh, well, do you have a hormone problem? If you don't have a hormone problem, then you lack willpower. So to a certain extent, we do have to acknowledge the culture that has been created where we have shamed people, made it seem like a lack of willpower, a laziness factor. And then to your point about embracing it culturally, let's also remember too, one of the things that was really enlightening and important for me was I lived in a community. I used to work in inner city Baltimore and very much lived in the same community. It is not ideal to go say, take a walk, right? When you live, or when the sidewalk smells like urine, right? And you're stepping over trash and other, it's not a fun experience, right? is not a fun experience when it costs me less to buy ramen noodles at the corner store than it costs me to buy an orange. I'm gonna buy ramen, right? Like if they even sell fruit that's not beat up, like those are real things that I think are also part of the culture of embracing curviness and things like that. There's a degree of what do you want me to do, right? So I might as well just be happy with the body that I'm in. Again, of the things that are complicated, there are absolutely cultural aspects, not just in the Black community, but even in the way that our neighborhoods and things that are set up. Let's be honest. We have not changed. The Black church has not changed the food that we offer, right, at the service, right? We're still frying chicken, serving ribs, macaroni and cheese. Like that's we're still contributing.
Agreed.
So Dr. Maxey, anybody walking into your, see, some of us have actually seen Dr. Maxey in person. And Dr. Maxey, I don't think you've ever even met the word obese. You look like a fit person that's taking good care of yourself. And so there's something about seeing those models. If I was coming to you as a doctor and you were giving me advice, I would be there. There are a lot of doctors. You walk in the doctor's office and the doctor is trying to get in the door sideways too. So it's not only the information that we have. There's something about the complicated things that Dr. Hines just mentioned that really do need to be addressed. And again, the mental health, the impact psychologically when we're talking to someone, we have to. This is why our dear friend Dr. Wilbur Jordan always talked about folks having a primary care person, someone that they could know and could know them and establish a relationship with them that would allow that kind of advice to be given in a way that's caring and thoughtful, because there's so much we can give to people if they believe that we actually care and we're trying to work with them.
So, Dr. Neighbor, should we open the mic for a few minutes at the top of the program?
Actually, you were reading my mind. We have 6 minutes, and we certainly do want to invite our audience to jump in on any of the topics that we have brought up or something on your mind.
While we're waiting for somebody to jump in, I just want to go back to this whole thing about Dr. Maxey getting ready for summer and wearing a bikini. I don't want to see that. I don't know if anybody wants to see Dr. Maxey in a bikini for the summer.
I don't
be
think
as
that's
fit
a
as you
problem.
want.
I don't think that's a problem that anybody's going to see.
Well, I don't see any comments or hands yet.
Yeah.
So let me throw out.
But let me just answer Dr. Walks. I was 185 pounds. I'm now 162. And I've been exercising and using some of the things that we talked about, trying to be fit like you.
Dr. Gibson's hand is up.
Can we unmute Dr. Gibson?
His hand disappeared.
There we go.
Thank you. I have to say that I made a comment earlier about maybe it's time for us to start teaching. I'm with Dr. Neighbor Stevens on that. And Dr. Walks. I remember health and safety being a class that was taught, a required class that was taught in school, and I had no idea that they don't have that now, and that's a travesty, because it's imperative that parents take up the mantle in that regard, and it's something that parents can do because of the involvement in the calorie consumption of the whole household, as a matter of fact. So I think if there could be good, useful conversations, interactive conversations in the household, about health and safety and about how important it is to be mindful of what we eat, because Dr. Walks was absolutely right. Or whoever it was that said the church food is the same church food I ate when I was a child and still enjoy. But moderation is one of those things that can be taught at home. And I'm a staunch advocate of that, the moderation part. Because even if you're gonna fall off the rails a little bit, just if you practice moderation, I think that that's not a bad idea, but it's an even better idea if we can teach health and safety at home. Thank you.
Dr. Gibson, I remember at Howard University, if I'm not mistaken, we had a whole college of home economics, if not a department. I don't know if it's still there or not, but I remember the whole of the 13 colleges that made up the university, one of them was home economics.
Mm.
That's what you're speaking about. I don't know if that's still present or not.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I really don't know what's happening with education, primary or even post-secondary. But I'd say if we take it upon ourselves to have good conversations and good lessons on what is good, not what's fashionable, not what's considered socially, whatever the term is that they use today, but just I think Dr. Neighbors Stevens called it common sense. Well, yeah, that's a great start, because simple suggestions, like let's take an apple. Now, maybe that might not be somebody's favorite snack. If you take that same apple, cut it, peel it, put some cinnamon on it, and nuke it, I mean, you got what tastes like apple pie, but it's the same apple because all you add is cinnamon. Just to start.
The baby is sleeping. Put your ear things on.
Baby is sleeping?
And Linda Hall has a hand up.
Okay, there we go. We talk about we need to have a primary care physician. Speaking as one of those patients that has been searching and searching and searching for a primary care physician that will take nutrition seriously in the Chicago area, it's tough. I've been trying for years. Now, I'm a snowbird, so I'm in California half a year, and I'm in Chicago area the other half. California, I have no problem. I have a doctor that tells me there's no such thing as moderation. Don't eat that. And that's because moderation means, for me, if I have a big box of fruit snacks, then I eat the whole box of fruit snacks. And moderation begins when the fruit snacks are gone. I can't eat popcorn because popcorn raises my triglycerides, and I'm fighting. I really do not want to take Lipitor. So I'm right above where I need to be. I'm at 125 for my LDL, which is not good. I need to be at 99 because I'm 68 years old. And so I know I need to keep working on my diet so that I can get it down. But when I'm in Chicago, I need to see a doctor that is interested. I can't find one. I'm in the western suburbs of Chicago, and I just cannot find somebody that's interested. They all think that everything's fine. My triglycerides are not really high, but they're too high. They're higher than they should be. And my HDL is lower than it should be, but it's not tragically low. So everybody wants to kind of wait and see when you get to a point where you have a stroke, and then you can react. So what do I do?
So I have a question. What is the reason you don't want to take statins?
My father had liver cancer, and my niece had a problem with her liver. And I know they're metabolized through the liver. Those statins are metabolized through the liver. I don't have any liver issues, but I do have a history of cancer. And I have a history of radiation to the pelvic area. So I'm afraid to introduce something that's going to affect my liver.
Well, most of the statins don't have a statistically significant negative effect on the liver. And I think it's important early on to get your numbers lower, both through diet and in some cases through medications, because the LDL that's high, the HDL that's low, which is related to exercise and energy extension. You don't want to have your left main or cardiovascular artery clogged. And that way, you not only are you at risk for a stroke, but a heart attack, et cetera. So I think at least for a short period of time, you might want to consider that to get those numbers lower, in my opinion. But check with your primary care doctor. But
Yeah, because my primary care physician in California thinks that it's okay. But she doesn't think my numbers are okay, but she thinks that I can get them down because I have before. I went through a lot of stress when my husband passed, so I started eating and acting crazy. So trying to get my weight up. And see, the problem is I'm not overweight, so everybody thinks I'm fine.
Well, Ms. Hall, I was going to make a suggestion. I don't know any adult physicians in western suburbs of Chicago, but one suggestion I might make is you might want to go to the NMA website. It's nmanet.org. They do have a physician directory there, and perhaps you can find someone that you can check out in that area.
Okay.
In addition to that, I was going to say, I'm not exactly sure how you're searching, but maybe looking for what's called an integrative medicine clinic. So integrative practices oftentimes have providers of various specialties, including nutritionists, acupuncturists, massage therapists, oriental medicine providers, and a whole host of folks that usually work in a team-based way, and then more traditional Western medicine providers too, that work in a team-based way. So that might be another option for you too, because essentially, Western medicine doesn't necessarily give you in-depth training on nutrition. Like your traditional medical school scenarios does not give you a whole lot of focus on some of the things that are considered alternative medicines, right? So you might, some of the barrier that you might find in finding someone who's on the same page with you is people can't tell you about what information they don't have, right? So that's not, for me, I'm not anti anything, but that's not my specialty area. So if that's what you're looking for, I might not be the right person for you, not because I'm anti it, but because that's not my expertise. So trying to your point about finding somebody that aligns with what you're looking for, consider integrative medicine specialists or integrative medicine clinics.
Okay. All right. And so I would just Google integrative medicine practice. Okay.
Yes.
I think her suggestion about going to the NMA website to find practitioners in that area might be a really good thing too.
Will do. I really appreciate you guys, by the way, as you know, because I've been here for 3 years now. Every Sunday.
So let me just respond to that. We appreciate you too, and we do remember when you let us know that your husband had passed, and certainly that is a very challenging transition to make in one's life. So we appreciate you staying with us and being with us, and we love you, and we are happy to know that you're still with us.
Thank you.
Well said.
So
We're at the top of our doctors.
Dr. Maxey?
Yes.
I would like to offer my final comment at this point. My final comment, since we alluded to this being moving into the summer season, I do try to learn something new every day. And I learned something new yesterday that if maybe you all knew this, but I want to share it. Now, we all have we've talked before about using sunscreen and protecting ourselves in UV light and what have you. And I know that there is the thought that if you have melanin containing skin, that you don't have to worry about melanoma. Well, that's not true. You do have to worry about melanoma. It just doesn't occur where melanomas occur in non-melanin or lesser melanin containing skin. So we too need to be concerned about that. The point though is that melanoma only represents 1% of all the skin cancers. And we are certainly well represented in the other two types of skin cancers that too are triggered by exposure to UV light. So the bottom line is, for lots of reasons, you need to use your sunscreen when the UV levels are high. Now, the big thing that I learned yesterday is that no matter what brand of sunscreen you use, it decomposes when it gets hot. Now, maybe you all knew that. I didn't know that. So when you get your sunscreen and you're going to go out to the picnic, or you're going to go to the beach, or you're going to be in your car even, driving around, make sure you keep that sunscreen cool. If you're at the picnic or at the beach, drop it in the cooler, because if it gets hot, it will lose its ability to protect you.
That's interesting. Never knew that myself. Thank you, Dr. Neighbor. Dr. Hines?
So, I've been enlightened too, because I knew to reapply, but it didn't dawn on me to make sure that the canister didn't get hot. So I've been reapplying, but futilely. As we enter talking about, this is the unofficial beginning of summer, and we just had a conversation about taking care of our health and obesity. This weekend here, right, is sometimes like the beginning of when things can go off, like we're at cookouts and all the rest of that stuff. Ms. Linda Hall said there is no moderation. I haven't quite gotten there, but I think that what we got to in this conversation, hopefully that we can come away with, is have a strategy, right? Like have a plan on what you're going to do when you are faced with plates and plates of tables and tables of, whatever it is that you eat. It's a good time to come up with a plan, come up with a strategy on how you're going to deal with these things, right? Because they're not going away. These are regular, everyday lives. We still want to socialize. We still want to connect with people, but not to our own detriment. So like we talked about with COVID, have a plan for your summer season cookout. Enjoy.
Thank you. Dr. Walks?
Thank you, Dr. Maxey. Dr. Maxey, I want to start by saying, when I talked about you and the bikini, and your response was that you went from 180 something to 160 something, even at 180 something, you were still not anyone that someone would look at and say, oh, you're out of shape and you're not taking care of yourself. And so the point that I was trying to make is that we physician people need to be like you, need to be looking like we're taking care of our health. And the difference between 160 and 180 at your height is not something anybody would observe. So I'm glad that you are taking care of yourself. I'm glad that you're optimizing your health. It is important for us to try to practice what we preach, I guess, is the point that I was making. People look at what we do. And to further put you in the spotlight, I got a chance to spend some time with you during your long process with your eye surgery. And I watched you as you followed what your doctor said, and as you didn't try to do things that were outside of what your instructions were. Remember when you and I were having lunch in California? There's something about us being willing to let ourselves be an example and letting ourselves be a role model for what we're asking our patients to do. And you're a good example of that. So far be it for me to say something nice about you. I really hate that I have to say this, but I really do appreciate the fact that you do lead by example. I think if we can lead by example, it makes a difference. And I want to go all the way back to just give a note of understanding to those of us out there that are struggling in this world. This is a complicated place. It is hard to deal with children and young people and screen time and what's taught in school and the fact that health and fitness is not a major part of education anymore, and the fact that, you know, a lot of kids can't pass those tests to go on to the higher level, and some of them are being passed anyway on to the next grade. This is a complicated place. And so the more people can come to places like Black Health Trust and get good information, the more people are able to talk with each other and get advice, one parent to another, one doctor to another, the more we can feel like we're not in this complicated battle by ourselves. And as I'm fond of saying, and I'll close on this, the only reward for doing it all by yourself is loneliness.
Good point. My final words are a bit of a praise report. I was talking to Dr. Nabert this morning, and I told her about my experience and coming from a National Medical Association meeting in the Virgin Islands to the wonderful state of Florida. And I look at a lot of TV, Fox News, CNN, NBC, and I get a bit jaded by all the red state governor's comments, the blue state governor's comments. But I was so impressed that 10 separate people or families interacted with me yesterday, all of them white, and all of them treated me so well, helped me find food to eat, bathroom, they were just so nice. I said, what is all this stuff I'm worried about racism and how bad the red people are, et cetera. And I came home feeling so good about how well I was treated by all these 10 different sets of white people yesterday. So my report is my faith in humanity is reinvigorated. And on that thing, I'll say that's my praise report, and hope everybody has a good Sunday, a good Memorial Day. Watch what you eat. Take care of your HDL and LDL numbers. Have a great Sunday. And Simon, thank you so much for making this work. And we do need people to donate, and we need you to send in your new addresses, your current addresses, and any addresses of people that you want to invite to the Black Health Trust. And where should they send them, Simon?
I posted the link to the mailing list in the chat. I'll do it again.
Okay. And thank you for your magic, Simon. Have a good day, great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Happy summer.